just to talk about one of the things that you mentioned, I used to work as a youth director with my wife at a synagogue back in New Jersey, and we stopped in a Kmart in order to buy materials, for whatever games or activities we were going to do. One of the most interesting things that, I found was a rope that had all the labels and stuff, and I read everything, of course. And on it, it says, has found to have carcinogenic materials by the state of California. And I'm
Right.
sitting there, I read it, I tell my wife, we look at each other and we say, you know what? Even if it's just 1 out of 50 states is saying something, we're
Right.
gonna step back a little bit and we're not gonna touch that. So
Right.
just to
That's why
get to
they
your point.
that's why they require, that's where the labeling works.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
right.
So let's I'm gonna fire off a bunch of things right now. One is in regards to your lab, okay, or your place of work. The way that I currently am envisioning it is like a children's den, in the sense that you have the place where you break things, the place where shoot lasers at it, the place where you dip it in acid. Is it an actual mad scientist lab slash warehouse where you get to just have a bunch of fun, or is it an actual serious place where you hope that none of your employees die from testing?
Well, there happens to be a glass is very hard to dissolve. So we put things in acid to very small amounts into acid so it would dissolve, and then we can test that and project out to how much of, if we find something shouldn't be there, how much of it is in there, what concentration is in there. So glass is very difficult to digest. Digest is the word chemists use. It means to dissolve. The chemical that the acid that will dissolve it also dissolves people.
Oh,
When the mafia has to get rid of a body, that's one way to do it. Um, it has its own.
you're clearly in contact with them.
No, but you actually have to sign all kinds of papers that you're not selling it to terrorists and stuff like that whenever you buy these chemicals. I bought my first bottle, and it comes with a safety data sheet. And I'm reading the safety data sheet, and it's like, and it says, well, if it gets a drop on your finger, it tends to go to your nerve endings, and it can destroy them, and it could cause an amputation, a drop. And I'm like, oh, because now in the cartoons, when I was a kid, we watched cartoons, and you put acid on someone, and there would just be like a hole.
Yeah.
That's not what happens, except maybe with this stuff. But most acids, the acids I use, nitric acid makes your fingernails sort of mustard colored.
Yeah.
And so I would get a drop or two on my finger. You don't even realize it when you're doing it. And then at the end of the day, I look, and there's a little mustard stain on my finger, and that was nitric acid. And I wear gloves because of that, because they're ugly, but not. I don't think they're dangerous. But I was like, well, I always get them on me. So I'm going to always get this acid, hydrofluoric acid, on me. I'm not doing that. And I was like, how do I get rid of this stuff? And I found a chemist who took it. I was like, it's a sealed bottle. I never opened it. I never will open it. And I don't even want to have it in the building. And we found a different way to test glass, but so that's the craziest thing I have here. But mostly we have in testing, you want to have repeatable tests. So we'll twist something, but we measure how much we twisted it and how much pressure was put on it. And every time you do it, it's going to be the same test. So if it fails in my lab, it's going to fail in their lab. I know when we drop things on the floor, it's from a specific height onto a specific kind of Armstrong tile with a metal plate under it on top of concrete. And they decided that's the closest to the average kitchen. Everyone's kitchen floor is going to be different. And, some have ceramic floors, some have vinyl. some have wood floors, whatever it is. But there has to be one way to do it. Otherwise, if the tests aren't repeatable, you get any answer you want. You go to this lab for this material because he passes that one, he passes that one. So most of the stuff is we're just reenacting regular things that might happen to a toy or something like that, and then and recording what happened. The chemistry is it's pretty rote chemistry. It's the same thing over and over again. The main thing is just to pay attention that it makes sense. Like we do a lot of things in a lab to make sure that it's really the truth. Like you go in your kitchen, you turn on your oven to 500 degrees and or more likely 450, and you put in pizza. How do you know it's 450 degrees? Because 6 years ago, the guy in the factory said it was 450 degrees. And the pizza comes out about the same every time, so it probably is. Every time I run a lead test, I have a bunch of unknowns. Those are things I'm testing to find out what they are.
Right.
And every time I have known samples, I have a 1 parts per million, 2 parts per million, a 10 parts per million, a 5 parts per million. And based on that, we figure out exactly what does 1 part per million look like. And because it's a different temperature, slightly different atmospheric pressure, different humidity. And that can change things. The equipment may be running a little this or that. The electricity coming in could be a little higher or lower. That was something that was shocking also when I got into the lab business. Electricity is very unstable, very inconsistent. It's not the same. 220 is like 199. So every time it's different. So we're constantly checking, and we look at that and that's that's still making sense. 2 has got to be twice 1, and 10 should be 10 times 1. And then when we run something, so we get it gives a response, and they say, oh, that is this much parts per million. So it's all the stuff we normally do, just a little more scientifically done, but not particularly mad science kind of stuff. If you're careful what acid you have.
Okay. So when it comes to the different types of products that you work on, right? I'm assuming you work on almost anything, whether it's clothing, whether it's toys, carpets, furniture, utensils. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure there's a wide range of stuff that you work on. And one, I would really like to know the types of things that you work on and people should be testing. And second is labels. We talked about labels from the get-go, but sometimes labels probably have their own requirements and own regulations. At least I hope so, right? So do you also test the labels, or are they already quote unquote approved by the governing bodies / Amazon?
Well, there's 2 parts of the label. There's what does it say on the label, and those regulations are typically included in the regulation of that product. And then there's the actual material, the ink, the fabric or plastic or whatever the label's made out of, cardboard box. And those things, well, it's different. Depends where you are. In America, if the box is going to be thrown out or the bag, we don't have to test the chemistry of it because your kids aren't going to be playing with it. But let's say the box. I was just looking if I don't have anything right here, but let's say the box is designed that you're going to keep it in the box. That's going to become the storage box. Sometimes you get a toy and it comes like in a really nice zippered bag. And
like a deck of cards, where like you usually keep a deck of cards inside of a box.
Inside the box, right?
Okay.
Right, definitely. But even a toy comes in a container. If you buy like a big Lego or something,
oh yeah,
it comes in one of the big boxes. So that box has to be tested has the same chemical regulations as the toy itself. That's considered a toy because it's where you keep the toy. But if it's just a cheap cardboard something or just a throw, it's just to get it to the customer. So then that and it'll be thrown out in the garbage. So in America, we don't have to test that typically. There is a state regulation that I haven't seen anyone follow or anyone enforce called TPCH, which is you have to test all the throwaway stuff, packaging for a few chemicals. Now in Europe's the opposite. They have all those regulations, but additionally, they, as we mentioned before about the Tri-Man logo, they have a lot of regulations about what's going to go in the landfill, specifically because you're going to throw it out. Now that has its own set of regulations, and though so they have to be tested for certain chemicals, and then there all this other stuff, where you have to notify people that cardboard goes with cardboard. That's a big difference between the two of them. But in that case, the packaging would be tested, and the label is of course on the packaging. The biggest issue with labels, though, is that it has to say all the stuff that needs to be said. There's a lot of warnings. Some are standard boilerplate warnings. Some of them depend. If it breaks into small parts, then it needs a small parts warning. If it doesn't break, and you can't always know that till we test it. People will say, "I want to get my labels right first, and then we'll do all the rest of the testing." We can get most of your labels right first, but there's a certain amount of when we test it, we'll find out if the labels are good.
Those who are selling on Amazon as, let's just say, private label, in the sense that they are the manufacturers, or those who are selling it as brands and they're bringing it in the resellers, and they're making sure they're supposed to already have all that documentation and information in order to put it on Amazon. Wouldn't they have their own, I guess, in their company in order to do these testings?
Yes. Well, it depends. If you're selling Lego or Mattel, very well-known brand, I'm sure they have it. But a smaller brand, or if it's your own brand, may or may not. And if you're the seller, you're on the hook for it. Another thing is a lot of people have gray market kind of stuff. It's not. They're not on good terms with the manufacturer. The manufacturer's not giving them test reports. So Amazon might ask them for it, and so they need to test. They'll need to test it just for that. A lot of times, though, once Amazon has, if it's a big brand, once Amazon has the testing from one of the sellers, anyone else selling the same brand a lot of times is off the hook now. I have seen that, and but it doesn't always work like that.
So how often do people need to be doing testing? I'm assuming it depends on the product. There are different regulations depending on the type of product that people are selling. But how often should there be testing?
So yeah, that's a very good question. Typically in the United States, you should be testing annually. However, if you're still selling the same stock that was tested, you made one run, you tested it, and it didn't sell well. You've been selling the same thing for 3 years now. You don't need to retest it by regulation. However, this is one of those places where Amazon gives people a hard time. They're like, "Nope, you need annual testing." I was like, "What are you talking about? No, it's the same stuff. It was good then, it's still good." And you're typically not going to win that argument, even though you're right. There are other places, I just don't want to say them publicly, where Amazon's more lenient. But this is one where they're actually more strict sometimes. Sometimes not. Like everything Amazon. But
so what types of products don't require testing? At least government and Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, if you sell like, it's hard to find something that doesn't need any testing, but there are things that need less testing. Um, if you sell like, say, flower pots, and they're not specifically for children, so I don't know that there's a regulation for that. You know, it doesn't really interact with anybody. Um, First of all, adults, there's less regulation, and second of all, um, you know, it's for plants. Like, and if something was in it, what's going to happen? Your plant's going to die. Um, I mean, there's some people who would worry about that, and you know, and I don't want to kill my plants either. But are we going to put a burden of testing on people for you know, because we're worried about plants? Um, so there may be a lead test requirement, but there just may not be. Um, you know, I'd have to research something like that. Typically, if it's electronic, it's going to have a lot of electrical testing, and you've got, you know, in New York City they have all these lithium batteries blowing up and catching fire. We understand why electrical things need to be passing testing. You know, it just has to. And anything that's fabric is going to have some flammability testing if it's clothing. And most fabric consumer products are going to need some kind of flammability testing, but all children's clothing will. And in general, anything for children is going to need. There's probably furniture that doesn't need testing. Children's furniture is going to need, but adult furniture, I'm not so sure that there's really a big requirement. Oh, another new requirement that's just come out is children's furniture tip over testing. Um,
Yeah.
they that's just came out the last little bit because you know, furniture falls over on kids, and that can be very dangerous, very heavy, and so those regulations have finally hit, and you know, those guys, that's something, you know, new that needs to be tested. Um, and the but it's hard to find something that doesn't need anything, but you know, but you can find here little things here and there.
When you have, especially with regards to Amazon, let's say you have a customer return, um, in whatever condition it's in, whether it's still the way it is, or it was, you know, or used a little bit and they were like, you know what, this is not what I'm looking for, or it's just coming out of Amazon's warehouse, and it's a removal order and it's supposed to go back to the Amazon seller's warehouse. Sometimes instead of the Amazon seller taking it back, they'll give it to a reseller or a company that's just gonna sell it to, you know, through some other platform. Now, Amazon at this point just doesn't care anymore because it's not on their platform. But do the government bodies or governing bodies require new testing on returned items that are going to be resold? And I'm not
Oh,
talking about flea market sales because nobody cares about flea market sales. I'm talking about like actual other online stores or presences.
well, if it was tested once, that testing probably still good. Um, I don't know if they collect the testing for that, and I don't know that it was tested once. You know, to start with, there's plenty of stuff that's not tested. Um, I don't think the fact that it was returned makes any new requirements, but but it doesn't take off any either. Um, but there are different ways where people feel like they can fly under the radar. You know, the mom and pop stores, and uh, but as far as actual regulate, you know, and then maybe they can or maybe they can't, but the regulations themselves are the same, just maybe harder to enforce them there.
Okay, so in the US, it's kind of a weird atmosphere. I'm sure for anybody who's producing anything or trying to sell anything due to the actual federal government, and then there are, you know, the state. right? So you probably have some federal laws and you probably have some state laws. Just as California, for example, has those 800 chemicals. Geez, that's a lot of chemicals. 800 chemicals that they find dangerous. How do manufacturers deal with each and every single regulation, and then also each and every single state regulation?
So it is challenging. I mean, I had people come to me and and they ask me, tell me what I need to do to sell this product in America. That I get a lot of those kind of requests. But there are it is complicated because it's not just the federal government. It's the FDA, the FCC, the FTC, the CPSC, the CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol. The and you can have a product that's regulated by 3 or 4 different agencies. The FTC will be very on top of fiber content on your clothing, and when you say "Made in America," was it really made in America? And then the CPSC is worried about if it's flammable or not, and if you have tracking labels, and and there's a lot of mattresses is one of those. A lot of state regulations on mattresses. They're covered with labels.
Yes, they are.
And, some of that's state regulations. And so, how do you find them? And so that's something I do. I scout them out. Trying to find all the different regulations or all these different agencies. You would think it's easier in Europe where we just have one big agency, but it's actually more complicated because you still have to find all the different places where it comes up. At least I know I go to this agency will deal with those things. In Europe, it's the opposite challenge. They're all called the same thing, but they're all different kind of regulations, all one agency, but they still have different subsections and sub whatevers. And Canada also, it's all Health Canada, but they just call it the same thing, but it's all different agencies really.
So, is there one place in the whole world that is so strict that everyone can follow their regulations and call it a day?
We're gonna do their regulation, and then we know we're good.
Okay.
There are groups who organize these kind of things. Well, if you sell to Walmart in the store, they have they have enormous amount of regulation, and you would consider it overkill. You're going to pay a lot for that, but some of it is to meet every single state regulation. I mean, any store that sells in every state in the country and every country in the world does not want to have to keep track of, well, it's good here but it ain't good there. Right. That's just, they have enough nightmares. They don't want that one. Walmart also worries about all different kinds of legal liabilities, and so they'll make you do tests that aren't regulations at all, but they know it's less likely they're going to be sued, or something like that, or lose if they did get sued. So you could do something like that, but most companies are trying to avoid that. Actually, they're like, no, I don't want to do everything possible because it's just it feels endless. If it's a very large company, they want to do everything. Like Walmart wants to do everything, but small and even medium-sized businesses, it really adds up, especially if you have a lot of products. So they're trying to basically do everything, but without extra stuff. What I typically tell people as far as state regulations in the United States, if you meet California, you're probably going to meet all the others. But but California, the reason people are the most worried about it is because of the strict enforcement, with the lawsuits and everything. And if Maine passed a regulation, um, it people just don't worry about it. It's a very small state, and I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about it, but that they don't have nerves to worry about everything, and they'll just assume that it's going to be covered by California. That's those companies do it.
Right. So at what point should companies be testing?
Well, before you sell it, I'll tell you better. Before you pay for it, your factory should sign in the contract that it will meet whatever countries you're selling to's regulations, and then I would test it right after it's in the middle of production. So you're getting a totally random sample. We can arrange for like there's two words, by the way, that I see people interchanging, and they're different things. An inspection is a guy who goes to an inspector, and an inspection is going to your factory and looking at typically the process. So there are social inspections where they make sure you're not abusing your employees, you feed them, they have a place to live, they don't work 12 and 18-hour days and stuff like that. But the simple inspection is they go to your factory and they just notice the teddy bear's eyeballs are all falling off, or the labels are upside down because the guy didn't know English, and or just it's not sewed together nice. That's an inspection. That's not necessarily a safety regulation. It might be, but it's more of I don't want to sell garbage. I want to sell it. I don't want to do garbage. I don't want to get a bad name for it, and I don't want to be stuck with it because I can't sell it. But in testing is actually testing for safety regulations. That usually goes back to the lab. But we can have a guy go to the factory and just grab a sample, and he'll grab a random sample. The factory might not. Depends how well you know your factory. Do they have like a few they keep on the shelf that they know they made right, and that's what they test? But is that what you're getting? Maybe not. So that if you're, depending how much you're worried, the best thing is that the factory guarantees you it's going to meet. You send an inspector who doesn't work for the factory to grab some samples for the lab randomly during production, and you test it. If it fails, you say, you know what, I don't want them. Now the factory is scared of that too. They probably won't start making it until you give them some money, but at least you want them given all your money. You shouldn't really take ownership of a container of something if you don't know that it's good, or you think at least. But you shouldn't just trust the goodwill of everybody, because things happen, and I've seen it many times. And so that's really when you should be doing your testing, and all the other regulations and registrations and listings and all the kind of stuff. It should be done early on, because it's much easier to do it right the first time, or earlier on, even if it's after the first time. But the further in you are to back end everything that it was okay is much more complicated. Sometimes doable, but much more complicated. And whether you're getting pulled by customs or the CPSC or the FDA, or whether your listing's down for a month. Your listing's down for a month, you're not making any money that month, and some of your costs are fixed. You're going to have them just the same. And if your rankings get ruined, because if you're not selling, you're moving down the totem pole. So it's there's a lot to lose if you get in trouble, even if you don't lose everything. So I would always advise, and I know people don't listen to me, but some do. But I would always advise to do everything in advance. And but if you didn't, we'll try to catch you up and get and hopefully everything will be fine, or at least mitigate things that we can't totally fix. So that so you're in your best position possible.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is that America is not necessarily the land of the free, but it definitely is the home of the brave.
That's right, definitely.
So
Especially Amazon sellers are all home of the brave.
yeah.
Um,
So we're a little running out of time. I feel like I'm gonna have to do another one with you really soon to get a full picture. But is there one thing that I did not ask you you think is extremely important for any company and or especially Amazon to know with regards to compliance and regulations, testing, labeling, etc.
I would just, I mean, I think we went over a lot of the details, but I would just say, live life with your eyes open. Um, as comforting as it is to close your eyes and not pay attention, not worry. It's usually a good idea to pay attention and find out as best as you can what do you need to be doing, so that you know your life will be calmer, and you can do it. You can actually do it. A lot of things are not nearly as expensive as you think to do, and testing does not have to break the bank. Even hiring consultants to deal with compliance and safety doesn't have to break the bank. And but not doing it could break the bank. A lot of Amazon sellers are very creative and great businessmen, but they hate nitty gritty. And
Yes.
and I do. I mean, I think y'all also do a different kind of nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But I do nitty gritty stuff that people can't even stay awake while they read it. And you know, I actually, the harder it is to solve is the most fun for me. When it just like I can't figure out what's wrong with this. Everything looks fine, and Amazon just keeps saying no. And those are actually the challenging ones, are the ones I enjoy the most. My customers don't, they want the easy stuff, but and they want me just, in 3 seconds, I'll do this and this, but and I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for them. And it happens to be that, that's the fun is figuring out something that's just won't figure itself out, unsolvable, not, and then solving it.
That's
But I
amazing.
would just say, keep your eyes open, and you'll be better off for it.